I have a quick question for all of you. Raise your hand if anyone, anytime has said something good about you. Your parents? Children? Come on! Your spouse? No, that doesn't count. Parents definitely, yes. Okay. Oh my God, that's so disappointing. Because the next question was, you have to keep your hands raised if the same folk said something not so good about you. But I didn't get a lot of yes in the first time, so what do I do? Okay. So the third question is, how does that make you feel about yourself? Do you think you're a good person? Not so good? Any answers? Oh my God, come on. I know it's the second last session of the day, but come on. You can do better. Okay. Okay. So let's assume some of you think you are good, some of you think you are not so good. But as a developer, I would say the answer is it depends. Not on you, but on the situation. So now let's take yourself out from that scenario and put any Java feature in. So is the Java feature a good feature? Not a good feature. Again, the answer is it depends. Depends on how you use it in your design, in your code base. And this is exactly what I'll be talking about in today's session. I'll be talking about a couple of new Java features like string templates, implicit classes, instance made methods, unnamed pattern variables, and statements before super. Has anyone been using any of these features? Lovely. 2, 3, 4, 5, hello, yes. Okay, that's good. Then that's okay. And why do you think you should be learning from me? Because I have good communication skills. I've written a couple of books, and I have also been blogging about all these features. I'll also take you through my blog during the session. And for each topic that I would be covering, I'll be talking about what the topic is, but not just the syntax of the topic, also the semantics. So what are the difference? So yesterday my daughter asked me, so how do you explain the difference between syntax and semantics? So I told her, okay, you're small, you have 2 legs, 2 eyes, you're cute, but the semantics is you are amazing, you are brave, you are cute, and you are an angel and kind of the universe for me. So that's the difference between when we talk about the syntax and the semantics, because whenever we start learning a new topic, we kind of get overwhelmed by the syntax and we miss the important part, which is how the feature would help our code bases, our design, how would the feature impact all the other parts of our code base. So I would be covering that part. And of course, that also depends how much any feature you should be caring about depends on how much you use it, either directly or indirectly. So that's one of the ways to look at it. And each feature that we would be talking about, of course, if it doesn't solve a pain point, it's of no use. And along the way, I would also talk about some of the anti-patterns, some of the ways you should not be using those features. So let me start with string templates. Has anyone used string templates or interpolation in any other languages apart from Java? Okay, a few, yes. So when we talk about string interpolation in Java, it's a bit different from the other ones, because here we're talking about not just string interpolation, which is the combining the static part of the strings, the literals, with the variable values. We're also talking about verification and validation. Now again, what's the difference between these two? Let's say if we talk about verified data in context of a JSON construct, if the structure is correct, we could say that it's verified JSON. But what about valid values in that JSON? So let's say if we're talking about JSON, which is for details of a person who is in the voting list, if the age is more than 18, then the data is validated, otherwise it's not. So of course, why do you care? So how many of you have used Java string? All of you. So that's what I said in the beginning. Why do you care? Because you would be using that feature either directly or indirectly. And of course, everyone who has used string would have used string concatenation before. So some of the examples of string concatenation where that becomes an issue is SQL injection. We've all heard of examples where data has been deleted, not for one user, but all the users, depending on how the value is passed to it. And this is one of the emails that was sent by a company which claimed to be a kind of working in email etiquettes. Can we see the problems here? Due to the string concatenation features. Of course, I kind of made it more, exaggerated it, but you get the point. And, sorry?
It's like a spam giveaway.
Yes. and this one, when we talk about a JSON data, here one of the values is not a valid value. If you talk about the latitude, it's not valid value. And we could also take care of all of these pain points via string interpolation. So this is the value that I was talking about. It's not a valid value. And I will hop on to the demo of this feature. But before that, I want you to kind of, I want to highlight some of the changes that has been came up about string templates, which was published, I think this week or the last week, where Brian Gates, the architect of Java language, he said the string templates, which is a preview language feature, it was previewed in 21, again 22. It will no longer be a preview feature in 23 because they are considering a lot of changes to the feature depending on the feedback that they received. The goals remain the same. They would still be talking about interpolation, validating data and verifying data, but the exact syntax might change. And when they would have more details, we can just wait and watch. And until then, we can talk about the things that this feature is going to solve. Probably in the future, you might see a difference in the syntax on how the feature is being used, but the aims and the goals, that will be the same. So let me hop on to the IDE for a demo. Okay, so this is one of the most common examples that you might see where you concatenate a couple of values which are passed to this method. So what are the, okay, the code is not compiling. Let me quickly check that part. Oh my God, my hands are freezing. Generate, not logger for class. So this is single line completion by IntelliJ IDEA. So that was deliberate, the error. So this is available in IDEA Ultimate. So you could generate, I know that's funny, but you could generate a line of code. The system would get the context of your code and you can generate line. Of course, it's generative AI, so you need to verify whether that code is valid or not, and then you can move on. Right, and now let's execute this code, and the name of the class is string concatenation and process. Now this was again a result of single line completion. You can use it at various places to complete your lines of code. Now let me quickly run this code and see what the problem with the code are. So as I had a slide in the beginning, there were some issues with the concatenation. I could not see where the space was missing or where it was, okay, this is supposed to have a negative value and then it would print because I'm sending it via the logger, the error message. Now, this is the value that is being printed. Again, I am not able to I could see the problems now when I run the code, but that was not too evident when I was kind of browsing through the code. So, what are the solutions? Let's see. When we talk about string concatenation, we know using the plus operator could be tricky. So, let's see what operations, what other options do we have. I could replace this concatenation with string builder. That looks neat, but again, it's still, I'm not able to figure out if there's a missing space still, right? Is that still visible or is that not visible? Visible, not visible, okay. Okay, let's see what other options do we have. I could replace the plus operator with the formatted method call. The resolution is too much, so I'll have to scroll. So, it solved one problem, but introduced another. Now, I could see that a space is missing between %d and for here, but then I have to hop on from the literal to the parameter list and then figure out what value would be placed where. So, not so good. So, let's see, do we have any other option? Let's try replacing plus with message format dot format. Again, I would say kind of the same problem. I can see where the missing spaces are, but again hopping on and off between the string value and the variable values. Let's see if we could do better. And now the final option that I want to use is replacing that with a string template. And now in this case, I do not have to hop on from the values that I concatenated to the other part, and of course, I can figure out there is a space missing here and where else here, and of course, I cannot introduce a space between the format which is used to add the variable value. If I try to add a space here, that would be an error, the compilation error. So, I cannot accidentally add spaces where they are not supposed to be. So, this goes here, and now let us try and see if that is working and if the output is better than the last time. Kind of yes, one, yes, let us try that again, one space missing, and now we are done. So, this is so now let me talk about, so if I go back to the example that I have here, we have a complicated string. Should I reduce the resolution so that it's visible whole of the string? If that's not visible from the back, just let me know and I'll move it back. Do you think that's legible from the back? Okay, good. So, now if you look at this string, we have a couple of naming thing, I would say. We have a string template processor, which is the str. We have the string template, and then we have the expressions, which is the variable values. Of course, these are just the variables, but anything that could return a value, that could be a method name, that could be expression, anything that could return me a value could be used here. So, now if I go back, so this is an image that I have used to make it more clear. Everything that goes within the double quotes or the triple quotes, if we talk about text blocks, that is a template, template expression, any variable value, and the template processor here is str. So, the three implicit processors, not implicit, the ones which come with the Java API, one is str, the other one is fmt, which is the formatting processor, and the last one is raw, which again you have to modify to get the things done. So, as I said, template processor, this is template and this is template expression. And now let me go back to my IDE and let us see what other examples we have. And I talked about the FMT template. Let's assume you have a record which has which represents an order, and you have a couple of shopping items and a customer. And let's assume that you want to generate a bill which is on similar lines. And what I've done here is I have created a record. The record goes in the generate bill class. So here I have values for all the records that I want to call and generate that bill on. And if I go back to the class generate bill, now this one has the magic of the FMT template processor here. Now this is the processor name which comes in the Java API, and this is a text block. Now when I have the formatting specifies here, so that would print the values in a particular format. So that would be right aligned or left aligned depending on what values you pass to it. And again, so this is the result of FMT. I have FMT for individual shopping items that I would be printing. I know that's getting boring, so let me just kind of run the program and see what the code generates, and let's see how that works. So this is the bill that you could generate. Of course, I'm printing it on the console, but you could send it to a PDF and do multiple things with it. So that's how you could format. Anyone has worked with COBOL here? Ah, yes. Right. Old people. So now let me talk a bit about some of, so these are, so FMT and STR, those are the processors, template processors that come with the Java API. When we talk about a processor, let me go back to the class. Where is the class? Billing with discount. Okay, sorry. Why can I not see this? Oh, okay. I can navigate to the definition of this class, what's happening here. And I can see that this is an interface in string template. And when I go to the processor, I could see that this calls process method whenever you call it, and this constitutes of two main components. One is the fragments, the other one is the values. So all the string literals, they are the fragments, and the values are the list of values that you just seen, the list of values that go in a template. And when you call the process method, the way the processor works is it combines the literal values, the fragments with the values to get the final value. Now, let me show you a couple of examples for some of the now this is the email part example that I showed to you in the beginning. Now, in this case, what I did was I did not create a separate template processor for it. What I did was I created a record that captured all the details that need to be sent out, and within the record in the constructor, I am calling convert to init cap, so that the name Alice, which was in all caps, that could be converted to init cap. So we fixed the value there. So there's a I was also talking about the anti-pattern. So there's a way the string template should be used and a way that they should not be used. When we talk about string templates, we're talking about what transformation should happen when the literals are being combined with the variable values. And in this case, there's no problem with the value that coming in. It's about the case of the value. So I don't want to probably change the value there. is there a way I could accept the value in a record, and I could have the constructor do the validation, because we know that constructors can do the validation. So that's one of the ways I can not use another custom string template and do it via a record. Again, I'm capturing all the values here, and if I print this, of course, that would, of course, I still need to fix the spaces, but this was about the init cap value that I wanted to show you. The other example is about, so this is an emoji demo where I have in this one I have text, something like a colon and a bracket, a round bracket, and what I am doing is I am creating a custom template, which the definition of that template is here. And what it does is, whenever it sees a value which is contained in emoji map, it replaces the value, the key with the value. So these are the keys and values that I have here, and when I use this template with a string like this, what happens is I am replacing this value with this value, and I am replacing this value with this value. Let me run this code. So this is how we could change, transform the values. I have another example in which, so in this example what I am trying to do is, I have a JSON file, and the JSON file is, here is the JSON file. So this is the JSON file that I have, and what I am trying to do is, I am trying to read the JSON file and I will print a PDF file. And what happens in the process when I was doing that, so I was kind of creating a test for my daughter, and when I was doing that, I realized that the PDF library that I was using, it did not transform the some of the characters, like the arrows which were pointing towards the bottom up, or the other things. So there were, these were the values that the PDF library was not kind of transforming or not recognizing. So what I did was, I created a custom string template where I, instead of using these values, I used a, let me show that to you. So here, what I am trying to do is, in any time that I come across a value which is the down arrow key, I replace that with some text. So in this case, the problem is not with the JSON value, the problem lies somewhere else. It's about the library that I'm using. So I don't have to modify my JSON now. So that's how I disconnect where I modify my record or JSON value, where I use the constructor, and where am I using the string templates. And if we talk about the string concatenation and how does it impact you, so this is one of the ways. How many of you tried working with RAG applications, created something, queried LLM? Okay, so you could do that, but again, there also you might construct your chat prompt by combining values with string literals and variable values. And what if you run into problems there? So by using string templates, what we're looking at is, we're trying to address the problem at the source and not waiting till the end or not waiting when we get to see those errors. So that's the main benefit of string templates. So this is about this, and yes, as I mentioned, catching errors early. And because if how many of you have worked with beta oriented programming, which is records, sealed classes? Anyone? Okay. So there we talk about whenever we are accepting, let's say, any values into our applications, so we should be checking the values at the boundary. And before records, it would be difficult to create data classes that could model that data. So with the records, modeling of that data becomes easy, and if we incorporate string templates also with them, that would make it more easier, because we are kind of validating the data at the source at the time of the concatenation. I just mentioned this one, and prevention is always better than cure. Okay. I already talked about the anti-patterns, and the other one of the anti-pattern would be that was somewhere in the code, I don't remember, but if the string templates are there to kind of make it easy for reading and writing code that mixes the literals with the variable values. But if you are talking about mixing, let's say, a backslash or any of the special characters with the literal value, then when you use a string template, reading that code might become difficult. So that would be in something, not really an anti-pattern, but you should be kind of avoiding that. If it feels right, do it, otherwise just drop it. So now I want to talk about implicit classes and instance main methods. So has anyone worked with those? No? Okay. So, sorry? No one? Okay. So let me hop on and show you an example. Let me remove this one, and so this is how we, okay, no, this is not. Okay. So this is how we have been writing our hello world classes main, and okay. Now this is, can you see that? Okay. So this is how we have learned how to write our first Java class or Java, the starting point. But now with implicit classes and main methods, instance main methods, what's happening is I could delete this one, and of course the closing braces. I could now this becomes an implicit class. Whenever we code, whenever we do not define a package, that becomes an implicit package. So in the same way, this class becomes an implicit class now. And I could also delete some of the words which might not be required when we are writing our first method. Now this is an instance main method. So this is mostly has been done this way for students who are getting writing their first Java program, so that they don't have to know about all the keywords which are not required at the first place, but they might use that later on. But that's not the only thing that can be done with these classes and main methods. Let me show you how it. So how many of you remember writing this banking application where you have interest and amount? All of us, right? So this is not the only program that we could write. We could write something which is interesting as this one. So this is all using the basic constructs, sequence, iteration, loops, and this is P. So of course, when we are introducing new programming constructs to students, so that's one of the things that we want to do. We don't want to introduce them to complex concepts, like encapsulations or things like that in the beginning. Of course, they would get to learn that later, but when we are starting, we want to kind of focus on the building a great foundation in terms of having a great algorithm building thing. So that really helps. I have a few examples more. So this again, this is an animated text, and of course you can introduce more concepts, like here we're talking about the string class, and we're talking about calling some methods on the string class. So we do talk about encapsulation and calling other methods, but we could gradually introduce all those concepts. So again, it is still using a lot of basic constructs like iteration, sequence, and iteration, and let's see what this code does. So when we're talking about introducing programming to new students, so that's one of the things that could be used. So that is displaying all the text using animated text. And one last example is about the guessing game. So again, in this I'm introducing yet another class, which is the scanner class, to get input from the console, and again a couple of other classes as well, string builder, but mostly it's about the logic. So who wants to guess the word here? Yes. Sorry. Not the word. Who wants to guess a letter here? Yes? Oh my God. Yeah. The next one. S. No. One attempt gone. Yes? H. I thought you got it in the first place when you said J. Yes. M. Oh my God. Oh my God, this is not Java? I thought it was Java. V? Sorry? Okay. Oh, so probably that's the case. Sorry about that. It is Java, yes. Okay. So that's how the instance methods and the implicit classes and the instance methods work. So this is still a preview language feature. And anyone aware of what the preview language features are? Okay, one. Okay, so when we talk about the preview language features, they are not the permanent or the production language features or any other feature where you see the word preview with the feature. That's not permanent, but that doesn't mean that it's incomplete. It's complete, but it's not permanent, and that's due to how Java releases the features now. With every 6 months, they need to get feedback so that if there's any improvement, they could incorporate that. So that's how it works. So yes, so I was talking about the name of this feature in the previous release was unnamed classes, and now it has changed to implicit classes, because when they had the name unnamed classes, there was causing a lot of confusion for the tooling. So now when we talk about the implicit classes, even though the class doesn't has a name, when it is compiled, it has a name, and the name is same to the name of the Java source file. So I could show you one of the decompiled classes here. So this is Hello World 2. So this is the one of the decompiled classes that we saw. It has a name which it's a final class, and the guessing game where the word was Java with a lower j. So we have the final class. The import statements are added. We did not have to add them when we were talking about them in the source code. So that's how it works. And of course, that's not the only thing. When you are, let's say, teaching students, and when you are ready to take the next step, you can easily convert these to Where does that happen? You can easily convert an implicit class to a regular class. Yes. So, this is how I could do that in the IDE. And the next step could be, let us say you could teach the children how to, not the children, the students, introduce more concepts. Like let us say I might extract this method, and I could say the name of the method is, let us say, print the letter, and this is how I could introduce more concepts when I am teaching to university students or anyone who is new to Java. So, this is still a preview language feature. So, should not be used in production, but yes, you can start using the feature. Now, the next, we talked about decompiling, and also it does not introduce a different beginner tool chain. The students would still use Java C in Java to run and compile their code. Variations of the main method, we talked about the changes to the syntax, to the signature of this main method. Can I see that? Okay, it is way high. So, this does not has any method parameters passed to it, does not has public, void, static with it, and these are the variations which are available, which work as the signature, correct signature of the main methods. I have commented a couple of them, because if I have public static void main, I cannot have an instance main with the same signature, but this is okay. So, all of these variations are okay, but you could, of course, you could not have more than one in the same class. And if let us say I change this to instead of string, I make this int, now the arrow would change and it would tell me which one is the right main method. So, we already talked about the anti-patterns. I would say use it for the purpose the feature has been created. So, it is about introducing new folks to the Java language. So, we are not talking about creating all the classes that we have with as implicit classes, because again when we talk about creating implicit classes, I cannot access them from the other packages or other directories. So, that is one of the drawback. And okay, so now we have unnamed pattern variables. So, anyone has used pattern variables before? Oh God, okay, just one, okay, 2, 3, 4, but I did not include the other slides, oh my God. Okay, so let me go to the link which I have mentioned here. Constructor makeover, okay. So, instead of using my slides, because I do not have the other examples that might be relevant to everyone who has not used the other parts of this feature. So, when we talk about the unused, so this feature talks about using underscore for the variables and for the pattern variables that are not used in the code. And there are two things to know about the feature: when do we use the underscore and when we should not be using the underscore. Because if there is a variable that is not being used, should that variable even exist in our code bases? That's a point to be taken care of. If the syntax requires the variable to be there, we cannot just live without it. We are using the side effects of the variable, but we are not actually using the variable. Yes, it is okay to have the variable and we can replace that with an underscore. But what if that is a kind of an after effect of the refactoring that we did and the variable is just lying out there? Of course, the IDE can point out for you, but you need to take the final call, like whether you want it or not. So, in this blog I am talking about of course, the IDE can generate all the code for you, but you need to kind of read the code and understand it to make sense of it. So that's on you. So if there are variables which you might not use, but still that's required in your code base, those variable names could be replaced with an underscore, and this one is a production feature. So you can use it right in your code bases now. You don't have to kind of think whether that would change or not. Is that for me? Time up? No. Okay. But that's a good way to tell to the speaker to shut up. Okay. So this is an example in which I'm talking about, so this is a try with resources statement in which the connection variable, though it's required as part of the syntax, it's not being used within the code, because I'm just checking if the variable, the connection is okay or not, and I log something. So I could replace the variable name with an underscore. So that kind of reduces the amount of cognitive energy that I need to read that particular code base. So that's one place where I could use this variable. Let's see what other places I could use. So this is an example of a record. So this is a seal interface and multiple records. Anyone who's used records? Okay, 1, 2, of course, yeah. Yes, a couple. So a record can be used to encapsulate your data without a lot of other extra work, like the getters and the setters, toString, hash code equals, all of that is generated when you compile your records. So when I say record point int x and y, that would create a class on compilation which would have all those methods. So for you, the work is less. Let the compiler do all the work. So this is a set of records that I have to, which implement the interface geometric shapes. And now what I'm doing in the next example is I have a code snippet where the variables, the case labels have these classes, and I am deconstructing the record, but I am not using all the deconstructed variables on the right side here. So x and y, even though they are deconstructed, they are not being used on the right side. So what I can do is I could replace that with underscores. Like in the example that follows, what I'm doing is, of course, if you're working with IntelliJ IDEA, it would detect the places where a variable is not being used, and it would suggest that you could replace that with an underscore, the variable name. So this is how the code is modified, and this is how it looks with underscores. Of course, in this particular case, I could also merge the first two cases, because I am using the same value on the right side. So I separate those values with a comma. So that's a record name, underscore, and on the right side the value. And if we are talking about nested records, then when we use nested records in a switch statement or an if statement with instance of, that could mean a lot of places where the variable names would be specified out, but they would not be used. So in those cases, I could just replace them with an underscore and just reduce the amount of chatter that I have in my code, because that's not required. So this is how I could use the underscores here. And the other example is, in this case, I'm talking about a for loop. Here, the number, the variable num is being used here. But let's say after some time the code is modified, and instead of printing this variable value, let's say the person tries, the developer wants to print, let's say any fixed value, in this case 0. So what happens to the original code base? The loop variable is no longer being used, and I could replace that with an underscore like this. Of course, if you're using IntelliJ, that would detect what places the variable is not being used, and you can replace that with a click of a button. Again, exception handlers, a lot of time we do not use the exception variables, and again we can replace that by the underscore. And this, the auto closable resources with try, I covered in one of the first codes. Again, I mentioned about the places where this could be a quotes mill, and we really need to figure out if the unused variable should exist in the first place or not. So, let us say if we are talking about unused lambda parameter, should we using another function, another lambda instead of this one, instead of just kind of numbing that with an underscore. So, that is one of the ways. And let us say we are talking about methods which have multiple responsibilities, and we just kind of duplicate the code without realizing we do not need one part. So, instead of deleting that part or refactoring the part, it would not be wise to use underscores and just shut those variables up there. So, this is up, and the last one that I wanted to show is, and yes, for the record patterns. So, this is one of the examples that I wanted to show. This is a perfect example, but what if I change the formatting a bit to this? So, formatting makes a lot of difference. We are trying to kind of include that in how we format the code within IntelliJ IDEA, but still not in, but we are working on it. Statements before super, has anyone worked with that? It is a preview language feature in Java 22. Okay. So, for this also let me, so this is a blog post that I have in which I talk about how the constructor is being kind of going over a lot of changes in Java 22, and what I am talking about here is about the feature statements before super, because whenever we are calling a constructor, a superclass constructor, a lot of times we need to verify the values that we pass to the super constructor. But because of the language constraint, we cannot do that without creating a static method and then passing those values to the static method. So, now that could be kind of changed. Now, I could call statements or method calls before calling super unless it calls the instance variables of my superclass. So, the beauty of this feature is that it is changing the syntax, it is making them I would say relaxing the syntax of one of the initial features of Java, because this constraint has been in the language since Java 1.0. The constraints has been relaxed, but the underlying working that remains the same. No changes are being introduced in the JVM. So, all the code that works since Java 1.0 would work all good with the new changes. And these are some of the examples where you might want to use statements before super. So, this is one of the examples, as I mentioned, when you are trying to validate the values that you pass to super. So, instead of creating, so this is an example, that is a base class, and when I extend that base class, I should be validating some of the values that I pass to the base class, but I cannot change the code of the base class. So, what do? I validate those values in my superclass, in my base class, sorry, and before passing them to the base class constructor. So, this is how I would have done earlier by creating a static method, but now I could inline that code, and this is how the code would look. So, that is the IntelliJ IDEA part, and this is how the code will look after the modifications. I have the statements that check whether the values are in range before calling the constructor of the superclass or the base class. Why do we care about this feature? Of course, because as I said earlier, it really impacts almost all of us, because this is one of the very basic things, validations that we do all the time. While passing values to the constructor of the base class, we need to validate them or transform them, because let's assume you are, so there was another example. So in this, I'm trying to kind of compare how the values worked earlier, how the changes worked. So as I mentioned, no changes with the JVM, it still works the same way. Again, you cannot execute any statement, and I think we're running out of time. No, still some time left. Okay, so this is an example that I want to talk about. We might accept data, the data that comes to any class could be in a format that we don't want to pass to a superclass. So the data needs to be transformed. Let's say I accept the data that comes to my derived class is in the form of a JSON, or that could be a CSV value. But what I want to pass to a base class constructor could be a completely different format, let's say an XML data. So that transformation could be done in the derived class without creating multiple static methods which shouldn't exist, because that's a lot of workaround that goes on. I know that's not rocket science, that's not difficult, but it's still a workaround that we kind of implement. So that's one less of a workaround, I would say. And if you have worked with records, so again, so this is an example that I worked in one of the real projects. I was trying to verify whether the values that I passed to the constructor of the record, the other constructor of the record, the values, the array values are not null, and the first value has some value, and I could do that with statements before super in this way. I no longer need those workarounds. The last example is about executing statements before this in enum constructors. So how many of you have written enums with constructors? 1, 2, a couple, yeah, that's good. So now you can have statements in the enum constructors without the workarounds. Again, yeah. So that's it. I think I'm done, and I'm good to take any questions now. No questions? Yes, Barry.
Did I hear you say that you don't need to import certain things when you're using implicit classes?
No, I mentioned that I could use the things without kind of making it really heavy for the students who are learning the new concepts. And when the class would be compiled, you would see the import statement. Yes, if it's in the lang package or in any other package that is imported implicitly, that's not required, but the things which are required for explicit imports, that needs to be there. That needs to be there in the source file as well.
Because I think they're working on something having to do with simplifying that part of it, but okay.
I think that's for the system.out.println, if you're talking about that part.
Yeah, I was just curious to see.
Okay,
if
okay,
you know,
okay.
secrets.
Yeah. Okay, no more questions? Yes, you can clap. Thank you.